from the heart of Dubai, where tomorrow is being built today, to the world. Welcome to the CTO Show with Mehmet. Here, we redefine technology and reimagine possibilities. With Mehmet, delve into the riveting realms of AI, cybersecurity, and digital technology. Experience the thrilling highs and lows of startups. Immerse yourself in the spirit of entrepreneurship and witness the future of business innovation being written in real time. Now, without further ado, let's tune in and explore the future.
Hello and welcome back to a new episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. Today, I have really a very special guest, an entrepreneur who have a very special journey, I would say. As you know, usually I don't like to steal much from my guests to introduce themselves. So this is why, Max, welcome to the show. I will leave it to you to introduce yourself. Tell us a bit more about you, your journey, and then what you are currently up to. And then we can start the discussion from there.
Sure. Thank you for having me on the show. I am Maxwell Ivey, known as the Blind Blogger. I am a accessibility expert working to help businesses leverage the disability community and to think about it in a more positive, approaching it from the benefits as opposed to focusing so much on the fear of negative publicity, lawsuits, or regulatory challenges, because there are so many good reasons to invest in accessibility and inclusion. But I started off in a family of carnival owners, and I did that for many years before my dad's death caused our traveling show to go out of business. In other parts of the world, y'all would refer to it as a fun fair or a fairground rides operator. I needed something to do with myself, so I started a website helping people sell their surplus amusement equipment. In 2007, the internet was much less accessible than it is now, so I had to teach myself to code HTML just to get online. I had to learn a lot of other things about being an online business owner, and people were inspired by that and asked me to share more. So I started a second website as the Blind Blogger, a name people had been using for me online, mainly because I was one of the few disabled people that was willing to be open about their disability at that time, when most were hiding their disabilities out of fear it would stigmatize them in this new online world. From there, I went into life coaching and also to podcast guest booking before finally finding my perfect place in accessibility. And really, I have to credit Alex Sanfilippo, the owner of Podmatch, and the great people over at AudioEye.com, which is an enterprise-level accessibility company, for helping me understand that I've got all these years of lived experience in the field and that I really should be sharing that knowledge and experience with the world and helping them realize the benefits of doing the right thing.
Great. And thank you again very much, Max, for being with me here today. And shout out to the team of Podmatch and everyone, who allowed, many hosts and guests to connect together. So a shout out to the whole team there. I want to, start from the journey, and thank you for sharing that. But you talked about, the decision to go out and, don't hide, the situation you had. Whereas a lot of people you mentioned, they have this fear. Sometimes what was kind of, the trigger for you to do that, Max? Like, when did you decide to do this? What was the main reason you decided to do it?
Yes, I would like to say that I was socially minded, that I was courageous. The truth is I grew up in a business where you put yourself out into the world. If you didn't promote yourself, you didn't eat. And so I really couldn't think of a reason why not to be open about my disability online. The other thing that my dad taught me from an early age is, Max, if you don't ask for help, it's going to take you a lot longer to get things done. There may be many things you won't be able to do at all, or they'll take you a lot longer. So I had this built-in understanding that asking for help was totally okay, which is a superpower that most people don't have. I got to thank my dad for instilling that and many other great lessons in me. But because I had that freedom of asking for help when I was struggling with how to accomplish a particular short-term goal on my website or even some of the long-term goals, I would send emails. I would post on social media as it came along. And so people knew I was blind. And the funny thing is a lot of them knew I was blind. And that some of them, after they visited my website, they would comment as if they didn't know I was blind because of the way I conducted myself on social media. But since I was putting myself, like I said, I just never thought about not doing it. And I honestly didn't realize it was a big deal until recently. I was speaking at a conference, and one of the people that was there with me said, Max, if it weren't for you and people like you, most people with disabilities would still be hiding their challenges online. They would be scared that disclosing, that's the word we use, could cost them work or public opinion would go against them. So you are a trailblazer in this arena. And it, like I say, it's one of those things that took me a while to understand and to accept. But, when I started, I was the blind blogger because most people online didn't know there were other blind people blogging and writing articles and writing books, whatever. Nowadays, you go online, you can't go 30 seconds on Facebook or LinkedIn without seeing an emoticon or emoji in somebody's profile or somebody's post or in their business names or in their taglines. So I feel really good that my lack of understanding how scary something should have been, allowed me to do it and then helped me allow other people to do it.
This is really very inspiring, Max. You also taught yourself HTML to get online, as you said. Like how that experience of building your own solutions shaped the way you think about the technology in general and how you saw it, like also, I would say, progressing over the time.
I've thought about that lately, and I sometimes feel that coding HTML of, deciding, okay, there has to be a solution. This isn't the best or most elegant solution. It isn't the most efficient use of my time, but it's what I can do. That sometimes keeps me from pointing out issues with software today, that it makes me more hesitant to call out people on social media or make a complaint to one of the regulatory bodies. And part of that is just I've gotten used to just, figuring out a way to get things done. Another little part of it is when you grow up in the amusement industry, you don't generally like people who sue people. So us ex-carnies are usually the last people to want to take somebody into court. But I feel like I'm only really starting to challenge people to make their software better, make it totally accessible, easy to use, and affordable in a way I wasn't even just a couple of years ago because I was able to teach myself HTML.
When you look now at all these tools like the AI tools that we have, do you wish that you had that back that time? Because today you can literally just using voice ask ChatGPT or any other tool to teach and write code to you.
Yeah, well, yes and no, because I would love to have the new tools if the new tools work. The sad thing is a lot of the AI tools do not work for me any better than WYSIWYG worked for me in 2007. And there are two reasons for that. One is the people building the AI engines and the AI-based apps are not building them with adaptive technology users in mind. They don't take the time to understand how we navigate pages and screens and text. So those things are not as accessible. I mean, right now I'm still not editing my podcast because none of the AI-based editors will allow me to use them the way you use them. And then the second part of AI is people just don't understand that a lot of this AI stuff is developing content that real live individuals are depending on for the success of their business. and this content is not being tested for accessibility. And the old garbage in, garbage out. Well, if actually a better example is a manufacturing example. If you take a prototype and somebody takes a hammer to the prototype before you start it down the assembly line and puts a dent in it, every unit that comes off that assembly line will have that exact same dent. And it's kind of like that with AI generated content, with human built templates, with anything you build that's supposed to make it easier for someone to create things for their website or their customers. If it isn't being tested to make sure that the output is going to be accessible, then again, it's creating a problem. So yes, I love the idea of AI. I even love it knowing that it could eventually cost some people with disabilities their livelihood, and they may have to train themselves yet again to do another type of work. But it's the promise of AI is more interesting than the current actual deliverables of AI.
Now, you mentioned something, Max, which is important, I think, to explain it to the audience, and probably for people who maybe intentionally or unintentionally, I would say they forget to think about designing, with I would say consciousness, that when you need to design, you need to take into consideration everyone, right? So from your perspective, why these tools, websites, products still fail when it comes to real usability? And what could, what are like some, it's a loaded questions. I feel free to take your time answering that. And what makes a good example of a truly accessible design that, it makes better for everyone, not only just for people with disabilities?
Right. So, and the last part of your question there is a great thing to focus on, which is creating a truly inclusive design for everyone. And the reason I pointed to that particular part of your question is because whenever we design for accessibility, we improve the user experience of everyone else who doesn't have a disability. And there are a couple of great examples of that. One is dark mode. Nowadays, everybody knows about dark mode, but originally, dark mode was a thing done for people losing vision who had to use large screen magnification of, say, 8, 10, 12, or 14 times normal size print. And by being able to invert the colors to a white on black background, lowered eye strain, allowed them to comprehend the information better. And that's something that's been done in the visually impaired community going back before the internet, back into the 70s and early 80s even. But now it's one of those things that helps people using mobile devices to see their devices in high and low light. And it also helps people using the full-size screens who are at their screens, lots of hours every day. So dark mode is one of those things that grew out of trying to make things easier on the visually impaired. And so I think a couple of things that we really need to think about when we're looking at inclusive design. One is that the design, when we design out of fear, we only worry about the minimum requirements. We worry about the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or in the U.S., the DOJ 508, or in other parts of the world, the European Accessibility Act. But when you're designing for those standards, you can create a website or an app that is compliant, but still not, in my opinion, highly usable by somebody with a disability. So if you're going to be totally inclusive, the design process has to either include people who have a variety of disabilities, or it has to include people who understand how the adaptive technology works and how somebody using adaptive technology navigates a screen. And that's a little hard to teach, but it is something that can be learned if an individual or an organization wants to spend the time. I do agree with you. Many people don't have the time, or they have yet to educate themselves because They either don't know that they need to, or they've got so many other things that they've got to be figuring out as a business owner that they just don't have time for one more thing that they're not familiar with. So it's not a vendetta. It's just overwhelm and a little bit of fear. But again, when we design out of fear, I had a woman on my podcast a while back. She said, Max, if I go to my kids and I want them to clean their rooms and I threaten them with losing their video games or having to not leave the house, she said, they'll clean the room, but I'll have to go out. When I go in there, there'll be stuff under the bed. There'll be stuff behind the stuff in the closet. She said, but if I can make them understand why it's important to have a clean room, like if they have a clean room, they'll be able to find their stuff more quicker and more easily, or they won't run out of things, or things that they really care about will last longer. So if I can make them understand that they need or want to clean the room, then they do it to a whole different standard. And that's the way it is with accessibility, because you can meet the WCAG standards. And I've been on many websites that were compliant. You know, you can run a checker like Waze or WordPress's checker on them, and they would come out, you know, highly accessible, but still not be enjoyable to use. So reach out to people in your personal community, in the business community, use social media. Try to bring in people who have disabilities who can advise you on how the technology is actually used, or invest in training for people that you do have on your team. I'm going to give you a couple examples of how I navigate the world that may help your listeners, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So for example, with a screen reader, the first thing you have to know is that in order to make the adaptive tech run alongside the OS and other software, they have to disable the mouse. So most of us, especially screen reader users and people using mechanical switch devices, we do not have a mouse. We can sometimes simulate a mouse, but that's not reliable. And I can't tell you how many times I got to the end of a form and wanted to press that submit or purchase button and couldn't, because it was set up needing a mouse click, and I couldn't do a mouse click. So it's really important that you build for keyboard navigation first, because that's mostly what we do. Generally, I navigate from the top left to the bottom right of a screen using tab and shift tab. I have commands I can use with my arrow keys to go by characters, words, blocks of text, and pages. I can do a search for a particular text or for a particular linked text and then route my cursor to it. But there's a limit to what I can do as far as navigation. So a website that may meet the WCAG may still give me trouble, and I might still not enjoy it. Another thing that I highly encourage people to do, this is not in WCAG, for example, but in my opinion, it should be. When you use adaptive technology, it takes you a lot longer to process information, to navigate all the links, text, and buttons on the screen to find the thing you need. So after keyboard navigation, you should really take a minimalistic approach to your website or your app. The more things you can either eliminate or move to a second, third, or fourth screen or page, the better that is for somebody using adaptive technology. The third thing I would tell people is use a simplistic approach whenever possible. I understand some websites and apps, the purpose of that product requires some fancy coding, but in general, anytime you add something that can be, you know, a little more robust, you run the risk of creating an accessibility issue. And it's surprising what some of those things can be. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten locked in a website because of the modal for their email sign up, which I've never understood why I'm supposed to decide whether or not to sign up for somebody's email list before I've even visited their website. But if I can't find my way to the button to close that link, I may have to close my browser or even have to restart my computer in some cases. And I think you can guess I'm not coming back to that website if that's the case. And we don't think of modals as high tech as far as website items, but sometimes they can be. So And I would say a last thing is focus on the most important reason why you're building a site or an app. If you make the most important things the most important thing, then you can also streamline the amount of information somebody like me has to go through. So those are four things I can talk to people that aren't necessarily in the WCAG or technical things, but I think they get you in the right frame of mind to get you off to a right start, which is keyboard navigation, simplistic design, minimalistic approach, and make the most important thing the most important thing. Now beyond that, one of the best things you can do is use your headings, because headings are like skimming a page for us. It makes it easy for us to cross over lots of information, assuming the heading structure is well built and is explanatory as to what information would be found in a heading if I chose to review the information within the heading. Making sure that all your buttons and links are labeled and that the label is in agreement with where it's going to send me if I press on them. And if you have a form, whether it's a simple email sign up or an advanced shopping cart, run the thing yourself. Make sure you can navigate it, because I used to think, man, I should get these people to pay me just to test their forms. And then I started finding out most people would find this stuff in their forms if they would just try to fill out their own form before they start putting it on their website. I was interviewed by a gentleman a while back. He said, yeah, Max, I used to work at a furniture company. And one day, for the heck of it, I decided to try entering my information in our sales form. He said, after I realized how frustrating it was for me, we estimated we were losing hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in cart abandonment because people were frustrated with our form. And he said, that's just sighted people frustrated with my form. He said, I wouldn't want to know what the blind people would have thought about it. So, test your website, visit your website. I know lots of us are so busy, we have to hire somebody to do it. But visit your website, try your forms, sign up to your own email list. Those are some simple things, because, I mentioned how when we improve accessibility and improves user experience, another thing that happens is if we focus on the user experience, and that's one thing that Alex at Podmatch does really well, is being customer focused. When we focus on the user experience, a lot of times we eliminate accessibility issues without even knowing we're doing it.
Like this is a treasure, I would call it, for people who want really to design and put the user first, rather than, as you just said, like maybe sometimes they even don't test what they are building. And some people, I saw them falling in the trap of, you just gave a lot of examples, but the ones that I've seen people fall in this trap, like let's say implementing things which they should not do, like for example these long pages. Even I hate them sometimes, because and why you do this, and you don't have even the, what you call them, these markers that will bring you up, and the menu disappear when you scroll down, and then you have to scroll all the way up, so whether with keyboard or mouse. And the other thing, the dark mode also as well. So yeah, now you mentioned something also, Max, even in the introduction about the legal aspect, and here I want to just like highlight things and ask your opinion also. So it's not only about the legal risks, right? So when you put accessibility first as a mindset, let's say, in your designs, do you agree with me that also you, as a business, whatever you're trying to do, you have the trust, the brand loyalty also, and better long-term customer retention? Do you agree with me on this?
I love it when a host just puts the ball on the tee for me like that. So I really appreciate the way you asked that question, and absolutely, definitely, it does help. And the important part of your question was when they're making the effort or when they're trying to, because that's one of the most important things I like to get across when it comes to accessibility, is that we don't expect perfection. In my opinion, perfection on a website is not possible, if for no other reason than a healthy business with a healthy website is constantly growing or changing. So maintaining accessibility is one of those things that's a progress, not a perfection. but I'm going to share with some information to make this point very clear as far as the benefits to your business growth and to your brand identity. To start with, most people will agree that there is a large number of people with disabilities in our world today. The general assumption is it's 1 in 6, which would be over 1 billion people. However, most of those stats come from government agencies or market research companies, and they depend on the person that they are talking to identifying as having a disability. So that 1 in 6 is just the people who are willing to write on a box or put their hand up and say, yeah, I'm disabled. That doesn't include generally people with autism, ADHD, other neurodevelopmental disabilities, because quite often out of fear of stigmatization by their friends, family, coworkers, or bosses, they won't admit. They will do what's called masking and purposely hide their disabilities. So we have this huge chunk of people who don't have an obvious physical disability that decide out of self-interest to hide their cognitive or mental or emotional disability. That's a large group. We also have people who are aging. And people who are aging, they will have the same problems. They will have vision loss, hearing loss, decreasing cognitive ability, decreasing motor skills, but they will never see themselves as disabled, even though they need the same assistive technology, the same accessibility features as someone who identifies as having a disability. So in my anecdotal research, just, living my life online and in person, I feel like it's probably more like about 1 in 3 have a disability globally. If we include the people who mask and the people who just don't see themselves as disabled. But that's just the tip of the iceberg, because those of us who do have identified this as disabled, we tend to be very loyal consumers. That's because such a small percentage of the internet, especially, or physical products and services, are being made accessible or being delivered in an accessible manner. It's currently estimated that less than 5% of the internet is totally accessible. And that's after over 10 years of the US, at least, having a law saying that the internet has to be accessible. So we're still at less than 5%. And so we generally support businesses that are making the effort, and we will stick with them through good times and bad times. We will also often overpay for products because we see the accessibility feature as a value-added proposition. Now, we shouldn't have to see things that way, but we do, because we want stuff. There are things we need that everybody else needs. There are things we want that everybody else, and so the companies that make the effort, we want to help them as much as we can. The other thing besides the person with disabilities are the friends, family members, and coworkers, and just those socially conscious individuals who want to support businesses that are making an effort to be inclusive of people with disabilities. But beyond the numbers and the loyalty, there's advocacy, because we will promote businesses making the effort. Again, we want to see them succeed. So we tell our friends and family, we post to social media. I like to say that when you improve accessibility, it's like inviting influencers that you don't have to pay. And it's sad how many people with disabilities have huge followings on their YouTube and other online content, but still haven't been discovered or leveraged by national or local or international brands. But we are definitely out there pushing products and services, making effort. So you add, if you multiply the actual numbers times the potential numbers times the loyalty times the advocacy, it's a number none of us can afford to ignore, but it's still a challenging proposition to build accessibility. But it's definitely something worthwhile, because last year they say people with disabilities spent $21 trillion globally. Now, globally, that sounds like a big number. Globally, that's still a small number. But here's the really cool thing. Because there are so few people doing accessibility, you could be able to stand out among bigger, more established companies by embracing people with disabilities. And one of the places where I'm really pushing this is to the people building apps, because, you know, the internet, as far as a lot of the software and smartphone apps, a lot of this stuff is concentrated among companies with lots of resources. But one of the really backwards things that I've noticed over time is the companies with the teams and financial resources to do accessibility right are usually the ones not doing it or doing it poorly. So this is a place where a small business owner can definitely stand out and build a loyal brand and even compete with the big dogs by making the effort. And that's the important thing to remember. At the end of it, with accessibility, it's making a sincere effort. And there are lots of people out here willing to help you with that. I did mention earlier, there's WordPress has a checker, Waze has a free checker. Me personally, when I do podcast interviews like this for this particular audience, I always offer to review the audience's first page, their homepage, for free if they'll reach out to me and say they saw me on the podcast, because I feel like if the homepage is good, the rest of the website will be pretty good. Mm-hmm. And every time I help somebody, there's a possibility that I'm helping hundreds or thousands or millions of people with disabilities because of improving a site or a blog or a podcast. You know, I can only do the homepage, but that can be a great start for somebody, especially for small businesses. And it can also give people a sense of maybe not security, but maybe a little comfort.
Right. You just, naturally connected to my next question, actually. Now, you've done hundreds of podcasts. You spoke to a lot of people in this field. And of course, I know, like, also you've done and you still do some advisory work. So when you come and talk to someone about this, a business leader, Max, what have you seen works best? Is it like just telling them data, telling them personal stories, or like the impact that you just talked about? What have you seen the most resonating aspect that pushed them? Yes, you know what, Max? We need to do it. We need to check what we have done regarding accessibility.
Right. Well, it's a combination of things. Sometimes you talk to somebody and their initial reason for being interested is compliance. Their starting point is fear, but it's still a starting point. So you're in the door, you're working with their team, and you have an opportunity to share some stories, to give them some positive examples why they should go beyond the minimum standards. Other people, they've got some curiosity, or they're generally good people working hard. They're just overwhelmed. And so there again, if you can give them some tangible reasons why they should care about it, then you can get them started. Some people, if you can help them better understand what the costs are going to be, because even though I can tell them that the investment is definitely worth the investment, a lot of people are always going to worry, how much time and money is this going to take me? And so, reassuring them as far as the time and the money aspect. One of the things that I do when I work with somebody on a website, and I learned this working with Alex, but I've carried it on to my other clients, is we don't have to fix everything today. So the one of the things I can do to help with overwhelm and fear is to go, okay, what can we fix today with your current resources? And what can we wait on until next week, next month, or next year? And in the meantime, I help them create a workaround and communicate that workaround to their users and potential users, so that they don't create any hard feelings why they're navigating accessibility. Because as I mentioned, there's something they're trying to do while they're doing everything else. And if you're in those early stages of trying to grow a business, a lot of times you don't have a lot of what we call bandwidth to take on new projects. So, and sometimes a company is using third-party content, open source content, to build their website in the early days. So sometimes you just have to say, hey, they can't do anything about this because this isn't their code, but we can work on that down the road. So I would say prioritizing the most important accessibility needs and helping people see that we're not going to disrupt their business by making this all happen yesterday is something that works. So it really just depends on the individual, the business, where they're at in their business life. And some people are only going to be interested in compliance. Some people are going to be customer focused. And when they realize that improving accessibility helps all their other customers, they're going to be in. Those who I can help understand it's not going to cripple their business while we do it, those are usually in. So a lot of it just starts by figuring out who I'm talking to, what kind of business owner I'm working with. And the other thing I've learned is that beyond the conversation I'm having with the business owner, I have to remember that they're talking to other people at the same time, and they could be talking to people who are trying to talk them out of doing accessibility at all through mainly through fear, through reminding them what it'll cost and telling them, well, can you even be sure that this will benefit your business? Will the people with disabilities buy from you? And that last part is important with B2B companies, because a lot of B2B companies are like, Max, you ain't never going to buy from my company. Why should I care? And I have to remind them, you don't know who's visiting your website or using your app. You don't know who's making the decision. A lot of your customers could have a spouse, an adult child, a paid employee, a VA doing the research to make their decisions, and that person could have the disability.
Right.
So since we don't know, we really have to make our websites available to people of all abilities. People who are able-bodied, people who are disabled, people who have certain life challenges but not others, and that's very difficult, which is why I generally try to approach this as, let's make the website as user-focused, user-friendly as we can, and we'll take care of the accessibility stuff along the way.
Absolutely, 100%. And this is the I don't know if I might call it the trap that people falls in, forgetting about, especially in the B2B space, because you just mentioned that, Max. So when we say the word company, we assume it's not a human behind, but actually companies are humans, and humans can have all the sort of the things, like they might, you don't know, and as you said, you never know who would land on your website. And by the way, like, it's just something important because you just mentioned this. So nowadays schools, they give this assignments to students in to go and search something. And the other day my daughter came to me and she said, like, I'm doing a research about company X. I'll not name the company. And then she started to ask these questions and why they have this and why they have that. So imagine this child, like they might also have disability, or they might, so you need to think about, it's not only business people coming to your website, it might be anyone. And this is really very important reminder to all businesses, whether you are in B2B, B2C, whatever you are, and of course government websites also as well. This is a non-brainer to have, this in mind. Now, I want to now kind of ask you something, Max, more related to entrepreneurship. Like, you are a serial entrepreneur. You, as from my research, and the profile you put on Podmatch, you traveled solo, written award-winning books, you spoke at conferences. Now, and you did it, right? So this is a topic I always ask people about, but you can be a better, example for a lot of entrepreneurs and founders facing adversity. What do you think is, two things I'm gonna ask you quickly. What do you think is the belief about limitation that people, they think, oh, we are not capable of doing this, we that they need to unlearn? And what is the difference between perseverance and stubbornness, in your opinion?
Well, First, the difference between perseverance and stubbornness is hard because you might think something I'm doing is stubborn, and I might think something I'm doing is resilient or perseverance. I recently interviewed a woman for my podcast, and her name is escaping me right now, but she gave me an excellent answer to this. She said, Max, the problem is entrepreneurs don't like to quit. She said, so I tell them it's okay to quit. Just don't quit on a bad day. So I try to remember that whenever I'm having a bad day, because as you mentioned, I'm a serial entrepreneur, I try to focus solely on the accessibility work. But sometimes I get distracted by past work because people know that I did something or enjoy doing something. So I try to remember if something within what I'm doing is frustrating me, not to quit on a bad day. But it is a hard thing because to a certain extent, business owners are like addicts. We're like gambling addicts to a certain extent. Once you've thrown enough money down into a business, it's hard to back away from it and stop. The same applies to sweat as opposed to cash and credit, because for most of my business life, I've depended on effort rather than cash. But the same thing applies. If you have enough of your heart, your soul, your effort into a business, it can be hard to walk away from it. So that's a difficult one. I would say spouses are good. Having a circle of people that you depended on when you started, that you can depend on now, to help you understand where you're at, because there is not much of a difference between a groove and a rut, you know. But as far as doing things that we didn't think we were capable of, overcoming those internal misconceptions, I've had to deal with that because there was a time, maybe a decade or so ago, where I thought for a long time, I thought I was a carnival owner and that was the only thing I was ever going to be capable of. And then there was a time where I thought helping people sell their surplus amusement equipment was my thing. But as I've gone through the many different smaller tasks that I had to accomplish for the bigger ones, I've realized that I'm capable of so many things. And in fact, one of my big problems nowadays is I'm capable of a lot of things. I'm capable of becoming competent at a lot of things. And I have to really force myself to focus on the things that I'm genius at and not the things that I'm just good enough at. That's one of those hard things, because a lot of us will go from thinking we have no abilities to thinking we have a very limited set of abilities. And then, you go from saying no or I can't do everything to saying yes or I can do everything. And then eventually you have to get to the point where you start saying no again. So, but I would say an important part of doing things that we don't feel like we're ready for is having a community of people that, even one really good friend who can tell you that you're better than you think you are when you're being too humble, and who can tell you you're not as good as you are when you're too proud of your work. Having that, at least one person you can count on to tell you the truth, is really important. The other thing is the world is really good at offering us challenges we're not ready for. And I've often thought about this way. There's a line in the Bible about how God will never give you a bigger challenge than he thinks you're ready for. That's paraphrasing, of course. And everybody always assumes, that means a negative challenge, loss of a child, a car wreck, losing, negative challenges. But it also applies to positive challenges. And I like to say that he's good at giving us dreams that come with batteries not included and some assembly required. So don't automatically dismiss things out of hand because an opportunity comes along that you don't feel you're ready for yet. The truth is, if we wait around until we feel like we're ready, we're never going to do them. And the really cool thing is, usually we don't have to do them in, like huge jumps. I don't remember whose book it was, but I'm listening to a book. The guy said, if somebody asks me to jump off of a cliff, how would be the best way to jump off of a cliff? He said, I'd always tell him, find the very lowest cliff you could find, and
Yeah.
so opportunities will come into our lives. Either we will seek them out, or we will subconsciously be thinking about them and they will come along, or people who know us or know about us will reach out to us and go, I think you would be good for this. Have you ever thought about trying it? For example, I never really wanted to have a podcast. I started doing podcast interviews in 2013 to promote first selling rides and then coaching and then podcast work. But hosts would go, Max, when are you going to have your own podcast? You'd be great at this. And I'm like, I don't think that I can handle the technology at the same time as having a conversation or recording myself talking. And so I really wouldn't consider it unless somebody was going to help me with that. Far be it from me to realize that was like asking the world to give me somebody. And so Fred from Canada, he calls himself the crazy Canucker. He showed up and said, Max, how about if I do all the technical stuff and you just have to talk? So then I didn't have an excuse. And we started the What's Your Excuse podcast. And I did that with him for about 6 months or so. And then finally he stepped away and I started doing it by myself. And I haven't done it every week. I'm not as consistent as I would like to, but now I have a new podcast called The Accessibility Advantage, where I focus on thought leaders and business leaders who can help me make the case for the need for accessibility, or help people better understand how to go about embracing, including people with disabilities. But, I did not want to do a podcast, didn't think I could do a podcast. An opportunity came along for me to do part of a podcast and then eventually a whole podcast. So there are probably opportunities in your life. There are probably things you've been thinking about doing. And I would say this, if there's a dream or a goal you have, then ask yourself, is there anything that I would have to do in order to accomplish this goal that I'm capable of doing right this minute? In fact, I have what I call my 4 questions method of solving a problem. And so what I tell people to do is first make a list of everything you think you're going to need to have or learn in order to accomplish a goal. Don't worry about the list being complete, because I guarantee you're going to leave stuff off of it that you'll discover later. And take each item and ask yourself, 1, can I do this? And if you can do it, then go ahead and take action on it immediately. Don't talk about it. Just go ahead and do something related to that one item. If you can't do something, then can you learn how to do it? If you can learn how to do it, then take action towards learning, whether that's watching podcasts, connecting with a mentor, taking a formal course in a college or some other training program. If you can't do it or learn how to do it, can you get somebody else to do it for you? And yes, that can mean hiring people. It can also mean asking friends, signing up for programs at colleges where they provide interns. It can be just people reaching out to you, like has happened to me many times in my life, where they offer to do things for you, or offer to do them at a reduced price, or offer you installment plans so that you can take advantage of their services and have them do things you're not great at. So then if you can't do it, learn how to do it, or get somebody to do it for you. Then you put it off to the side, which I know is hard, but you want to put those things off to the 4th column of things you just can't do anything about right now, and focus on the things that you do have some control over. And then every few weeks or few months, go back and look at what you have in each column and see which items you can move, say from can't do anything about it to now you know somebody you can do it for you. Or now maybe you're making enough money you can hire a VA, whatever. So those are my 4 questions that I use for solving problems, or for outlining, accomplishing a goal. And I hope that helps your listeners who are on the fence about building an app or starting a new business.
Absolutely. Actually, I gotta use that also as well, Max. So really, and just very quickly on what you said, if, I want to just kind of summarize it and agree with you. It's sometimes, we complain about these challenges and you call them positive challenges. And, I discovered, of course, this is maybe with age, the older we get, the wiser. I hope like everyone is feeling the same like me. And then you look back and you say, oh, you know what? It's good that that thing happened, which I thought it was bad, but actually it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. And I never knew about it. So this happened a lot of time. And indeed, this mindset is very important. Of course, if you're building business, but as well using it in your personal life. Um, Really, I enjoyed the conversation with you today, Max. So as a final call to action, so where can people get in touch and learn more?
Right. So I hope they will visit my website, theaccessibilityadvantage.com. They're welcome to send me an email to maxwell@theaccessibilityadvantage.com. And most everything I do is posted to LinkedIn. Over there, I'm Maxwell Ivey, and it's IV as in Victor EY. For some strange reason, the Ivies who came to this country and settled in South Carolina put an E in there. I don't know why. But Maxwell Ivey over on LinkedIn, theaccessibilityadvantage.com. And I do hope you'll reach out to me. I'm not one of those people that you have to be ready to hire, book, or buy something from in order to have a conversation with, because so many great things in my life have happened due to having an unscripted conversation with somebody I didn't know 5 minutes ago. And the other thing I like to tell people is I would rather answer an awkward question than to make people guess. So, if you want to talk to me or email me, don't worry about offending me. Don't worry about, am I using the right words or whatever. Just think of it as two people who have questions or want to have a conversation about subjects that they have mutual interest in. So I've appreciated our conversation as well. And just as an aside to what you said about learning from age, Yogi Berra once said that youth is wasted on the young.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. Well, so for the listeners, you can find the links that Max just mentioned in the show notes. We are available, as you know, on all podcasting platforms. Also, if you're seeing this on YouTube, you're gonna see them in the description. This is how I end my episodes. This is for the audience. Maybe we are airing this, and I'm very transparent with my audience. We are, recording this on 30 December 2025, but I'm broadcasting this probably in the second week of Jan. So Happy New Year, if I didn't say in the previous episode. And thank you for your support. Thank you for, listening. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for, making the show really reach milestones last year, which I wouldn't imagine. Having, the ranking in the top 200 Apple Podcast charts every single week in different countries. So thank you for all the people who tuned in from wherever you are. And for people who just discovered us now, I hope you enjoyed this discussion. And if you did so, give me a favor. We're trying to do an impact. This podcast is all about inspiring people, getting them to move forward, whether in their career, in their life. Maybe you're going to start a business. Maybe you're going to change job. So I'm hoping, with all the different aspects I'm covering, and I'm going to continue doing this in 2026 to push you forward. So share this with your friends and colleagues. And also don't forget to give us a rating on all the podcasting apps. So this is really important, especially in 2026. Things are changing. So we need your help and, your push so we can reach more people. And as I say always, stay tuned for a new episode very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hit that subscribe button. Share the show with your tech-savvy friends and fellow entrepreneurs. And leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Your support means the world to us.